Imagine for a second, right, that you are holding a script for a play. You've memorized the lines, you know exactly where to stand on the stage, and you hit all your marks perfectly.
Right, like a true professional.
Exactly. But deep down, as you're speaking the dialogue, you realize something really unsettling.
That you didn't write it.
Yeah. Someone else wrote this script. You are just performing it. Have you ever felt like that? Like your daily routine, your major life choices, maybe even your foundational definition of a quote-unquote good life are actually just being lived out to satisfy someone else's expectations rather than your own?
Oh, man. It is a really profound and incredibly uncomfortable question to ask yourself.
Yeah, it really is.
Because we rarely stop to examine the friction between living actively, on our own deliberate terms versus living passively as a hostage to our environment or our culture or our family.
And that tension right there, that is the exact mission for our deep dive today. We are exploring a highly provocative piece of writing from August 2019 by an author named Sufeng. It's titled Lifechanyuan's Viewpoint on Euthanasia. But right out of the gate, I need to pause, look right at you, the listener, and make something crystal clear. The ideas we are about to explore today are radical.
Very radical.
They completely upend conventional global ethics, modern medical standards, and traditional family values.
We are stepping into some deeply controversial philosophical territory here.
For sure.
So our role today is strictly that of neutral cartographers. We are just here to map out the terrain of this specific text, to understand the philosophical framework Shuefeng is building, and to explore the sheer logic behind these arguments.
Just laying it all out.
Exactly. We are not here to endorse these views or take a side in the ethical debate. We are simply unpacking the source material that you've brought to us to see how it fundamentally challenges our baseline assumptions about bodily autonomy.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can even touch the concept of euthanasia, we have to look at how this philosophy views human existence in the first place.
Right, the baseline.
Yeah, Shuifeng strips away a very comforting illusion that I think most of us hold on to,
Yeah.
and that's the illusion of the guaranteed long, happy life.
Oh, absolutely. Our entire modern societal structure is largely built on the denial of death's harshness.
Yeah, we don't like to look at it.
We really don't. We are conditioned to believe that if we just eat right and exercise and follow the rules, we are somehow owed 85 years and a painless passing in our sleep.
Right.
But this philosophy aggressively counters that narrative. It points out that the vast majority of people face incredibly harsh realities. I mean, people die young, they're tortured by chronic illnesses,
Yeah.
they perish in natural disasters, or they are driven by their own emotional turmoil into suicide.
And then you add in the chaos of war, starvation, exposure, sudden accidents like car crashes.
Exactly. The foundational premise here becomes crystal clear. Reaching a natural, satisfactory, painless end to your life is practically a statistical anomaly.
I was really struck by how much emphasis is placed on just how rare a quote-unquote good death actually is.
It's incredibly rare.
Because of that harsh reality, the Lifechanyuan philosophy identifies only two what it calls ideal ways to die.
Right.
The first one is pretty simple. It's just gonna sleep in good health and just not waking up.
Which requires what Suifeng calls a great deal of blessings.
Blessings, yeah.
Notice the language there, though. It's a direct acknowledgement that this kind of peaceful, painless, natural exit is entirely out of our conscious control.
You can't schedule it.
You cannot schedule it, and you can't earn it.
Right. And the second ideal method is something called Chanyuan meditation.
Right.
This is where a person consciously chooses the exact day and time of their death and then enters a deep meditative state to essentially just end their journey in this world.
Willfully departing.
Yeah. But I have a real problem with this framing, honestly, because both of these ideal methods are incredibly exclusive.
They really are.
The first one is like winning a cosmic lottery. I mean, you just have to be lucky enough to have those mysterious blessings.
Yeah.
And the second one, the meditation, requires what is described in the text as long-term self-refinement and self-cultivation.
It's essentially the equivalent of becoming a spiritual Olympic athlete.
Yes. So I'm reading this thinking, well, if the ideal is entirely out of reach for the masses, where does that leave the rest of us who aren't lucky or spiritually elite?
What's fascinating here is how the sheer inaccessibility of those ideals is used as the foundational justification for everything that follows.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. By establishing that a perfect natural death is utterly inaccessible for the general public, the philosophy pivots directly to offering a manufactured ideal.
Okay.
If you cannot rely on cosmic luck, And you don't have decades to dedicate to intense spiritual mastery. Society needs a practical mechanism for the masses to achieve a dignified end.
And that mechanism is euthanasia.
Exactly. That is the pivot.
But, and this is a massive but, we need to completely throw out our current globally recognized understanding of that word.
Yes, entirely.
Because the conventional definition of euthanasia is heavily medicalized. It requires a doctor's prognosis, physical pathology, usually an incurable disease causing immense physical suffering.
Right, it's a medical intervention.
Yeah, an intervention to ease the passing of someone whose body is already failing.
Uh-huh.
But the Lifechanyuan explanation completely severs euthanasia from physical illness.
It is a radical centralization of bodily autonomy. The definition provided is simply this. Anyone who does not want to continue their life but wants to end it voluntarily should be allowed to do so.
Wow.
The state of your physical body is rendered totally irrelevant compared to the state of your personal will.
The only concrete condition given in the text is that the person must be at least 18 years old.
That's it.
That's the entire barrier to entry. And ironically, the philosophy also states the absolute reverse.
Right.
If someone actively wants to live, regardless of how old they are or how dire their physical condition is, society must treat them, give them energy, and give them the hope to live.
It is entirely based on the individual's will, not their medical chart.
Yeah, we are looking at a framework where a person's desire to stay or leave is the ultimate unquestionable authority.
Unquestionable.
I'm having a really hard time wrapping my head around the practical application of this, though.
Oh, it's very difficult.
Because Schuffing brings up an example that I think most people would find incredibly difficult to swallow.
The 19-year-old.
Yes. What about a healthy 19-year-old? Someone in the prime of their life with a clear mind and a bright physical future who just despairs of life and wants to end it.
Right.
Even the author acknowledges that, to most of us, implementing euthanasia for that person sounds like a cruel joke. But they insist on that, right?
They do.
How does one justify treating a young, perfectly healthy person's emotional despair identically to the suffering of someone with an incurable physical illness? I mean, are we operating on a completely different understanding of what a human lifespan even is?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the author's philosophy, it comes down to how they view time and human connection.
Okay, walk me through that.
We have to look at the rhetoric surrounding longevity. How much time is actually enough to live? A century? A millennium? The philosophical stance here is that immortality is everyone's secret wish, but the unchangeable reality is that life is inherently just a short journey in the mortal world.
So, because it's a short journey, the end is always approaching anyway.
Right.
We are all just visitors.
Inevitability is the key here. No matter how much we love being alive, ending it is guaranteed. We will inevitably have to part with our friends and relatives.
Right.
So since those goodbyes are going to happen no matter what, the argument is that the individual should control the timing. Euthanasia is framed simply as a farewell.
A farewell.
Yeah. The philosophy posits that it is infinitely better to arrange everything leisurely, to say a decent goodbye in a cool and ready manner, than to have your life end suddenly in a hurried state of fear, anxiety, remorse, or regret.
Okay, so they're trying to remove the chaos from the exit.
Exactly. Removing the chaos.
Whether you are 90 and physically ill, or 19 and in emotional despair, the core human need being addressed is the same. It's the need for a dignified, controlled farewell, rather than a terrifying departure.
And a controlled farewell requires agency. And that brings us to the most controversial hurdle in this entire framework.
The people left behind.
Yes.
The family. Because if we accept the premise that anyone over 18 should be allowed to say this leisurely goodbye, the immediate glaring question becomes, who gets to sign off on this?
Right.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because the text takes a fiercely aggressive stance on family dynamics, the author uses a very specific, loaded word, kidnapped.
Kidnapped. That concept of being kidnapped is central to understanding the friction in this deep dive.
The claim is that most people are actually kidnapped by reality, by their environment, or specifically by their relatives. Because of this emotional kidnapping, people are living their lives passively, enduring suffering just to fulfill their family's expectations. So, Xu Feng completely rejects the idea that a person should need their family's consent to seek euthanasia.
We need to pause and acknowledge how deeply countercultural and frankly offensive that idea is to traditional morality.
Oh, absolutely.
We usually think of staying alive for the sake of our family, enduring pain so our kids or parents don't have to grieve, as a noble sacrifice.
Yeah.
It is widely considered the ultimate act of familial love.
And this philosophy frames that exact dynamic as emotional hostage-taking.
Hostage-taking, exactly.
It's arguing that staying alive just to spare someone else's feelings means you don't actually own your life. You are a hostage. Does the author actually believe we don't owe our existence to anyone but ourselves?
Yes, bodily autonomy is viewed as absolute and unshared.
Yeah.
I mean, if we look at global statistics, roughly 1 million people end their lives annually.
Right.
Swayfing looks at that number and asks a really uncomfortable practical question. How many of those people had their family's permission?
Wow. Very few, if any.
Right. The logical deduction is that if people could only end their lives with the consent of their relatives, practically no one would ever be allowed to do it. The relatives would always say no out of love or attachment or just fear of loss.
That leads right into the debate over selfishness.
Yes.
Because if a young person, or anyone, wants to end their life, the immediate reaction from relatives is almost always, how could you do this to us? That is so selfish.
The author flips that accusation entirely. Who is really more selfish? Is it the person who is in deep emotional despair or extreme physical pain, who just wants relief and a peaceful exit? Or is it the relatives who demand that this person bite the bullet, endure their suffering, and continue to live in agony just so the relatives don't have to experience the pain of grief?
That is a staggering accusation against the family unit.
It really is.
To look at a grieving parent or spouse and say, your desire to keep them here is actually an act of supreme selfishness.
The rhetoric is particularly pointed when discussing people lying in hospital beds for long periods with incurable conditions. They are described in the text as being tortured to death.
Oh, wow. Tortured to death.
Yeah. Forcing someone to endure that torture because the family refuses to consent to euthanasia is, in this view, the height of cruelty. Therefore, the individual must be the sole decision maker, completely unburdened by the family's input.
But let's look at the mechanics of this. Logically, if you completely remove the family's consent and oversight, you open up a massive vulnerability.
Yes, the logistical risks.
Right. How does society prevent abuse? How do you stop someone from being coerced into euthanasia if their family isn't there to protect them or vet the decision?
Right.
The philosophy provides a very specific logistical solution for this, relying on legislation and what they call a national convention.
Implementation requires a strict legal framework, yes. And the specific mechanism proposed to bypass the relatives while still ensuring the person is acting purely voluntarily relies on modern technology. Video recording.
Right, the video recording. Anyone who wants to accept euthanasia must sit down and video record their exact words and wishes. The absolute rule is no legally binding video, no procedure.
Correct.
Furthermore, this recording must happen in an environment completely free from duress, coercion, or that concept of kidnapping we just talked about.
Right.
But I have to ask, how do you actually guarantee an environment free from emotional coercion?
It's incredibly difficult.
Emotional pressure is often entirely invisible. A camera can capture a person saying, I want this, but a camera cannot capture the crushing, silent guilt an elderly person might feel if they think they're a financial burden on their children.
Exactly.
How does a legal system filter out that invisible guilt to ensure the intent is pure?
That is the immense friction of implementing such a system. The video acts as an attempt to freeze the person's clear intent in time, creating undeniable proof of individual will.
Right.
But proving the absence of internal psychological coercion is nearly impossible. To try and mitigate the logistical burdens that cause that kind of guilt, the text mentions that the aftermath should be handled according to the Lifechanyuan funeral system.
Oh, right. Let's clarify what that is for the listener because it plays right into removing the burden.
Please do.
The Lifechanyuan funeral system is essentially a standardized, streamlined arrangement that immediately follows the procedure. It is designed to handle the physical remains and the ceremony in a uniform way, which completely removes the logistical, financial, and emotional burden of funeral planning from the relatives left behind.
It keeps the exit clean and self-contained.
Exactly.
It is another layer of ensuring the individual's departure doesn't victimize or burden the living, further reinforcing that this is an independent choice. But establishing this perfectly accessible, legally protected avenue for death leads to a massive counterintuitive paradox regarding the preservation of life.
Yes. This is the part of the deep dive that really broke my brain.
It's a huge shift in perspective.
Xuefeng claims that if society actually implemented this system of open euthanasia and hospice care, where anyone over 18 could easily and legally access it without family interference, that at least half of the people who want to commit suicide every year would suddenly give up those thoughts.
Yes.
They would be saved. The quote is, the more we open up, the easier and simpler things become. The more restrictive we are, the more difficult and complex. So what does this all mean? How does offering a highly accessible, state-sanctioned way to die actually prevent people from dying?
This raises an important question about the deepest mechanics of human psychology and how we process a lack of agency.
Right. I was thinking about it like a psychological and architectural analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you are in a massive, crowded, incredibly hot room, and all the doors are deadbolted from the outside.
You're trapped.
You are totally trapped. The sheer panic of that claustrophobia, the feeling that you cannot escape no matter how unbearable the heat gets, that lack of control might drive you to do something desperate, violent, or chaotic just to get out.
The desperation is a direct reaction to the restriction.
Right. But what if, instead, there is a clearly marked, unlocked fire exit right at the back of the room? You know it's there. You know that at any exact moment you choose, you can just stand up and walk out.
Ah.
Is it possible that just the sheer knowledge of that unlocked door gives you such a profound sense of control over your own fate that the panic completely evaporates?
Yeah.
You realize, I'm not trapped. I can leave whenever I want. So maybe the heat isn't so bad. Maybe I'll stay in the room a little longer to see what happens.
That analogy perfectly captures the psychological mechanism at play here.
It's about control.
Exactly. Extreme emotional despair, the kind that drives people to sudden tragic suicides, often stems from a fundamental feeling of powerlessness.
Yeah.
It is the feeling of being kidnapped by life, unable to control the pain, the expectations, or the circumstances. By handing absolute, legally protected power back to the individual through an open policy and a clear mechanism like the video recording, you remove the feeling of being trapped.
You unlock the deadbolts.
When you restore the power of choice, the despair, which is often just a symptom of powerlessness, might evaporate. The theory is that millions of lives could be saved simply by giving people the unquestionable right to end them. It shifts the mindset from, I am forced to endure this, to, I am actively choosing to stay.
It is a staggering way to look at human resilience. Man, we have covered some incredibly dense, challenging terrain today.
We really have.
We started by exploring the philosophical view that a truly blessed, natural death is an unattainable lottery ticket, and that modern society lives in denial of how harsh the end usually is.
Right, and that realization drove the radical redefinition of euthanasia we discussed, stripping away the medical requirements of physical disease and transforming it into a universal right for anyone over 18 who simply wants to say a voluntary farewell.
And then we waded into the really heavy concept of being emotionally kidnapped by relatives and tackled that fierce debate over who is actually being selfish when a life is artificially prolonged against someone's will.
And finally, we explored the paradox of the fire exit. The profound idea that legally offering the absolute right to die might actually empower millions of desperate people to actively choose to live.
It really forces you to take a hard look at the script you're holding in your own life. So, to you listening right now, try to evaluate your daily reality through the lens of this philosophy.
Yeah, look closely.
Look at your routines, your obligations, your major life choices. How much of what you do is truly lived actively, driven by your own pure intent? And how much of it is lived passively, kidnapped by the expectations of your environment, your society, or your family? Where are your deadbolted doors, and where are your unlocked fire exits?
It serves as a critical audit of our own autonomy, pushing us to define where our obligations to others end and our ownership of ourselves begins.
And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to ponder today, something that builds on the implications of this text. Suenk advocates deeply for planning a leisurely, cool, and ready goodbye. Imagine for a moment if society actually adopted this mindset.
That would change everything.
What if we treated the end of life with the exact same pitiless, open, practical planning as we do a major career change or planning a wedding, regardless of how old or healthy someone is?
It would require removing the taboo surrounding death entirely.
Exactly. If we removed the sudden shock, the whispers, and the terror surrounding death, if you knew, as a simple fact of life, that any of your loved ones could legally and peacefully plan their exit at any time, how would that change your daily relationships with them?
That's a powerful question.
If the guarantee of time was completely stripped away and you knew they were only here by their own active choice, would it force us to treat each other with more profound kindness, more deep attention, and more genuine presence right now, today? Maybe if we knew the final curtain could be drawn at any moment by choice, we'd finally put down that script we've been performing and start truly living with the people right in front of us.